Marcus Reed hadn't touched a woman in 10 years. Not since the night he discovered his girlfriend laughing about her charity case boyfriend to her friends. But when wealthy heiress Eleanor Whitman burst through the wrong door into his carefully guarded world, everything he'd built to protect his heart began to crumble. What Eleanor didn't know was that her own family was about to destroy the building, and everyone in it, for profit. And what Marcus didn't know was that the woman who'd accidentally invaded his sanctuary would soon risk everything she'd ever known to save the community he'd sworn to protect. In a world where love across class lines seems impossible, would two broken souls find the courage to choose each other over everything they'd been taught was safe? If you're watching this incredible love story unfold, hit that subscribe button and tell me where you're watching from, because this tale of unexpected love will leave you believing in second chances. The morning alarm never rang. Marcus Reed didn't need it. Every day for the past 8 years, his body woke up at exactly 6 in the morning. No exceptions, no snooze buttons. He swung his feet over the side of the narrow bed and reached for his work boots. The apartment was quiet. Too quiet, maybe, but Marcus liked it that way. Simple, safe. His small kitchen held a coffee pot, 1 cup, and a thermos that went everywhere with him. No dishes in the sink, no photos on the walls, no mess to clean up later. Everything in its place. Marcus stepped into the hallway and locked his door. Unit 12D. Most people never saw this part of the building. The superintendent's quarters sat tucked away from the main apartments, where rich people lived their rich people lives. The basement was his real home. Down here, surrounded by pipes and boilers and electrical panels, Marcus understood every sound, every hum, every click. The building talked to him, and he listened. He opened his metal toolbox and checked the contents. Wrench, screwdriver set, electrical tape, wire strippers. All clean, all in order. He'd been working in buildings for 15 years, but he'd been the super at Wellington Arms for 8. Long enough to know every tenant's habits. Long enough to stay invisible when he needed to. The boiler log sat on a clipboard near the furnace. Marcus wrote down the readings in neat, careful handwriting. Temperature normal. Pressure good. No problems today. But there were always small problems somewhere. He walked to the laundry room, where tenant Mrs. Alvarez had mentioned a dripping sound yesterday. Sure enough, a thin stream of water leaked from the pipe above the washing machines. "Easy fix," he said to the empty room. 20 minutes later, the leak was gone. Marcus cleaned up his tools and wiped down the wet floor. He always cleaned up after himself. "Marcus, honey, is that you making all that noise down here?" He looked up to see Ruth Alvarez standing in the doorway, 70 years old, sharp as a knife, and never afraid to speak her mind. She carried a basket of laundry and wore a bright yellow sweater that made her brown eyes sparkle. "Morning, Mrs. Alvarez," Marcus said. "Fixed your leak." "Oh, you're a blessing." Ruth set down her basket and studied his face. "But you know what I think?" Marcus smiled despite himself. Ruth always had opinions. "What do you think?" "I think you're too young to live like an old monk." There it was. Ruth had been dropping hints like this for months. She meant well. Most people meant well, but they didn't understand. "I'm fine," Marcus said. Fine isn't the same as living. Ruth started loading her clothes into the washer. "When's the last time you went on a date? When's the last time you talked to a woman who wasn't asking you to fix her garbage disposal?" Marcus picked up his toolbox. "I should get upstairs. Mr. Delaney wanted to see me this morning." "I'm just saying," Ruth called after him as he headed for the stairs. "Life is short, Marcus, even when you're only 38. The building manager's office sat on the first floor, next to the lobby. Frank Delaney had worked at Wellington Arms for 12 years, which made him the senior staff member. He was a good man, fair, steady. He treated Marcus like an equal, not like hired help. "Morning, Frank," Marcus said, knocking on the open door. Frank looked up from his computer screen. His gray hair was already messy, even though the day had barely started. "Marcus, come in. Close the door." That wasn't normal. Marcus felt his shoulders tense, but he kept his face calm. He sat in the chair across from Frank's desk and waited. "Inspection week," Frank said. "Starting today." Marcus nodded. The Whitman family owned Wellington Arms, along with 15 other buildings in the city. Every few months, someone from the family came around to check on things. Make sure everything ran smoothly. Make sure their investment stayed profitable. "Any particular concerns?" Marcus asked. "The elevator in the south wing has been acting up. I've called for a repair, but you know how these old buildings are." Marcus did know. Wellington Arms was built in 1923. Beautiful bones, but old bones. Things broke down. Things needed constant attention. "I'll take a look at it this afternoon," Marcus said. "Good." Frank leaned back in his chair. "There's something else. Eleanor Whitman might stop by this week." Marcus had heard the name. He'd never met her, but he knew she was part of the family. Young, smart, according to Frank, involved in the business side of things. "Anything special I should know?" Frank shrugged. "She's not like the old guard, less formal, but still." He paused. "Just keep things professional. You know how it is." Marcus knew exactly how it was. Stay polite, stay invisible, do your job, don't make waves. "Of course," Marcus said. "I'm not worried about you." Frank's voice was kind but serious. "You're the best super we've ever had. I just want everything to go smoothly." Marcus stood up. "It will." He spent the rest of the morning replacing air filters and checking smoke alarms in the upper floors. Routine work, peaceful work. The kind of work where he could think about other things. But he tried not to think too much. At lunch, he sat on the loading dock behind the building, eating a sandwich from his thermos and watching the city move past. Cars honked. People walked by talking on phones. Life happened all around him, but Marcus felt separate from it. Separate was safer. His phone buzzed. A text from Frank. Eleanor just pulled up front. Marcus finished his sandwich, cleaned up, and walked to the lobby. He didn't plan to introduce himself. He just wanted to see what kind of person she was. The front doors opened, and a woman stepped inside. Tall, white, well-dressed in the way rich people dressed well, like money was never a question. She held a phone to her ear and pulled a small suitcase behind her. This had to be Eleanor Whitman. She moved with confidence, but Marcus noticed something else. Tiredness around her eyes. The way she rubbed her forehead while listening to whoever was on the phone. Frank appeared from his office, straightening his tie. "Ms. Whitman, welcome back." "Thank you, Frank." Her voice was pleasant, professional. She ended her phone call and slipped the device into her purse. "How are things?" "Everything's running smoothly. Marcus keeps us in good shape." Eleanor's eyes found Marcus across the lobby. Their gazes met for just a second. She nodded politely, and Marcus nodded back. "I'll be staying in 12B tonight," Eleanor said to Frank. "Probably just one night. I needed some space to think." Marcus filed away the apartment number. 12B, 2 doors down from his own unit. "Of course," Frank said. "Is there anything you need?" "Just quiet." Eleanor smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "It's been a long week." She headed for the elevator, and Marcus went back to work. But as the elevator doors closed, he caught himself wondering what kind of week would make someone who had everything look so tired. The afternoon passed quickly. Marcus checked the problem elevator and found a loose sensor that he could fix temporarily. Not a perfect solution, but it would work until the repair company arrived. He was finishing up when his phone buzzed again. A text from some number he didn't recognize. "Please call me. We should talk. Daniel." Marcus frowned and deleted the message. Wrong number, probably. Evening came slowly. Marcus preferred the quiet hours after most tenants had settled in for the night. He could move through the building without small talk or questions. Just him and the familiar sounds of pipes settling and heaters clicking on. At 8:30, he decided to check the electrical panel on the 12th floor. Sometimes the lights in the hallway flickered, and he wanted to make sure everything was working properly. The elevator carried him up smoothly. The 12th floor was quiet, expensive, quiet, with thick carpeting and artwork on the walls. Marcus walked to the utility closet at the end of the hall and unlocked it. The electrical panel looked fine, but he opened his toolbox anyway and started checking connections. Careful work. Detailed work. The kind of work that kept his mind busy. He was so focused that he almost didn't hear the footsteps in the hallway. Someone was walking quickly, heels clicking on the floor. A woman's voice, muffled but clearly frustrated, talking on a phone. "No, Mother. I told you I need time to think." "Yes, I know what Daniel said. No, I'm not being dramatic." The footsteps stopped. Marcus heard keys jingling. "I have to go," the voice said. "We'll talk tomorrow." A door opened somewhere behind him, then closed, then opened again. Marcus frowned. That was odd. Why would someone open and close their door twice? He was about to go back to his work when he heard a different sound. Footsteps inside an apartment, but not normal footsteps. Hesitant footsteps, like someone wasn't sure they were in the right place. Marcus set down his screwdriver and listened more carefully. The footsteps had stopped completely. Something was wrong. Marcus closed his toolbox and walked out of the utility closet. The hallway was empty, but now he could see which door was slightly open. Unit 12D. His door. Someone was in his apartment. Marcus felt his heart start beating faster, but he kept his movements calm and quiet. He approached his door carefully, listening for any sound that might tell him what was happening inside. He could hear someone moving around. Soft sounds, careful sounds, not like a burglar, more like someone who was confused. Marcus reached for his keys, then stopped. The door was already unlocked, which meant he'd left it open when he came up to work on the electrical panel. He sometimes did that when he was just going down the hall for a few minutes, but that meant whoever was inside had just walked into an unlocked apartment. Marcus pushed the door open a little wider and stepped inside. A woman stood in his living room, her back to him. Tall, well-dressed, with blonde hair pulled back in a neat style. She was looking around his apartment with a strange expression on her face. Eleanor Whitman. She must have heard him come in because she turned around suddenly. Her eyes went wide when she saw him. "Oh." Her face flushed pink. "Oh no, I'm so sorry. I thought this was..." She looked around the apartment again, then back at Marcus. "I thought this was my apartment." Marcus didn't move, didn't speak. He just looked at her, trying to understand what was happening. Eleanor took a step backward. "I'm staying in 12B, and I thought..." The doors looked the same, and I was on the phone, and I wasn't paying attention. She was talking fast now, embarrassed. "I am so sorry. I'll..." "Leave right now." "Wrong door," Marcus said quietly. "Yes, wrong door, completely wrong door." Eleanor moved toward the entrance, but then she stopped and really looked at him for the first time. Tool belt around his waist, work shirt with sleeves rolled up, calm, steady expression. Marcus could see the moment when she realized who he was. The super. The man Frank had mentioned in the lobby. You're Marcus, she said. I'm Marcus. They stood there for a moment, not speaking. Marcus noticed that Eleanor wasn't what he'd expected. Up close, she looked younger, more real, and right now, she looked mortified. She also looked like she'd never been inside an apartment like his before. Plain furniture, no decorations, no TV, just the basics of what a person needed to live. Marcus stepped aside to give her a clear path to the door. It happens, he said. No, it doesn't. Eleanor shook her head. People don't just walk into other people's homes. I don't just walk into other people's homes. I'm usually much more careful. You seem careful, Marcus said, and he meant it. Eleanor paused at the door. Are you sure you're not upset? I would be upset if someone barged into my apartment. Marcus almost smiled. Almost. I'm not upset. I really am sorry. I know. Eleanor stepped into the hallway, and Marcus followed her to make sure she got to the right door. Unit 12B was indeed just 2 doors down. Thank you, she said, pulling out her key. And I'm sorry again, for everything. Marcus nodded and walked back to his own apartment. He closed the door behind him and turned the lock. Then he leaned against the door and took a deep breath. For just a few minutes, Eleanor Whitman had been in his space, his private, protected space. And somehow, it hadn't felt like an invasion. It had felt like something else. Something Marcus didn't have a name for. Something that made him remember what it was like to notice a woman's face. Her voice. The way she moved when she was embarrassed. Marcus pushed himself off the door and walked to his kitchen. He poured a glass of water and drank it slowly, trying to calm his pulse. 10 years. 10 years since he'd let himself think about a woman the way he was thinking about Eleanor right now. 10 years since he'd wanted to. This was exactly why he kept his life simple. Why he stayed in control. Why he kept his distance from complications. Marcus finished his water and got ready for bed. Tomorrow, Eleanor would go back to her rich life, and he would go back to his quiet routines. Everything would return to normal. But as he lay down and closed his eyes, Marcus found himself thinking about the expression on Eleanor's face when she'd looked around his apartment. Not disgusted, not judgmental, curious. Like she was trying to understand something about the man who lived in such a plain, careful space. Marcus had spent 10 years making sure no one needed to understand anything about him. But for the first time in a long time, he wondered what it might feel like if someone did. Eleanor sat in her apartment, holding a glass of water and staring at the wall. What had just happened? She'd walked into a stranger's home. Not just any stranger, the building's superintendent. A man who probably dealt with entitled tenants all day long, and now she was just another rich person who thought the world belonged to her. Except that wasn't what had bothered her most. What bothered her was the way Marcus had looked at her. Not angry, not resentful, just careful. Like he was used to protecting himself from people like her. Eleanor pulled out her phone and scrolled through her contacts until she found Frank Delaney's number. Frank, it's Eleanor Whitman. I'm sorry to text so late, but I have a quick question. Who lives in Unit 12D? The response came quickly. That's Marcus Reed, our superintendent. Is everything okay? Eleanor stared at the message. Marcus Reed. She'd been in his home for 5 minutes and hadn't even known his full name. Everything's fine, she typed back. Thanks. But everything wasn't fine. Eleanor couldn't stop thinking about what she'd seen in Marcus's apartment. It wasn't just plain, it was deliberately simple. Like someone who had chosen to own as little as possible. No photos, no clutter, no signs that anyone else ever spent time there. Eleanor looked around her own apartment. Even though this was just her temporary place for the night, it was filled with expensive furniture and artwork that her mother had picked out. Things that were supposed to show how successful the Whitman family was. Marcus's apartment hadn't been trying to show anything. It had just been honest. Eleanor finished her water and tried to focus on something else. She had emails to answer, calls to return, a business to run. But her mind kept drifting back to the moment when Marcus had stepped aside to let her leave. The careful way he'd moved, the space he'd kept between them, like he was used to being alone. The thought made Eleanor's chest feel tight. She knew what it was like to be alone in a room full of people, to smile and make small talk while feeling completely disconnected from everyone around you. Maybe that was why she couldn't stop thinking about Marcus. She recognized something in him that she'd been trying to ignore in herself. Eleanor's phone rang. She looked at the screen and felt her stomach drop. Daniel. She let it go to voicemail, but the damage was done. Now she was thinking about her ex-boyfriend and all the reasons she'd been avoiding his calls. Daniel Price was everything her mother wanted in a son-in-law. Successful lawyer, good family, impressive resume. The kind of man who looked perfect on paper. The kind of man who had made Eleanor feel invisible even when they were in the same room. Eleanor deleted the voicemail without listening to it. She was done being invisible. Done pretending that surface connections were enough, but that meant she had some apologizing to do. Marcus Reed deserved more than a stammered sorry in his own hallway. He deserved a real apology from someone who understood what she'd done wrong. Eleanor checked the time. 9:15. Not too late for a proper conversation. She walked back to Unit 12D and knocked gently. The door opened, but only a crack. Marcus stood behind it, still dressed, but clearly ready for bed. "Ms. Whitman," he said, polite but guarded. "I wanted to apologize again," Eleanor said. Properly this time. Marcus opened the door a little wider, but he didn't invite her in. "You already apologized." "I apologized for walking into your apartment. I didn't apologize for assuming you were just another tenant." Marcus's expression didn't change, but Eleanor saw something shift in his eyes. "When I first saw you in there, I thought you belonged there," Eleanor continued. "I thought I'd walked into someone's living room by mistake, and they happened to be home. It took me a minute to realize who you were, and that's on me." Marcus was quiet for a long moment. "You don't need to apologize for that." "Yes, I do." Eleanor kept her voice steady. "I made an assumption based on things that don't matter. And that was wrong." "Things that don't matter," Marcus repeated. Eleanor felt heat rise in her cheeks. "I mean, you know what I mean." "I know what you mean." Marcus's voice was still quiet, but there was something harder underneath it. "You saw a black man in an apartment and assumed he lived there? Then you found out he was staff." The words hit Eleanor like a slap. Not because Marcus was angry. He wasn't. Because he was right. "That's exactly what happened," she said. "And I'm sorry." Marcus studied her face for a moment. "Most people don't apologize for things like that." "I'm not most people." "No," Marcus said. "I guess you're not." They stood there in the hallway, not quite comfortable, but not uncomfortable either. Eleanor found herself noticing things about Marcus that she'd missed earlier. The way he held his shoulders, the careful way he chose his words, the fact that he'd opened his door at all when she'd knocked. "Thank you for accepting my apology," Eleanor said. Marcus nodded. "Have a good night, Ms. Whitman." Eleanor started to walk away, then stopped. "Eleanor, you can call me Eleanor." "Good night, Eleanor." She went back to her apartment and closed the door behind her. This time, when she sat down with her water, she felt calmer. She'd done the right thing. She'd owned her mistake and apologized for it honestly. But as Eleanor got ready for bed, she found herself thinking about the way Marcus had said her name, like he wasn't used to saying women's names, like he was out of practice. Eleanor fell asleep wondering why a man like Marcus Reed, steady, competent, quietly kind, would be out of practice talking to women, and wondering why that question felt so important to answer. Morning came too early. Eleanor's phone buzzed at 7 with a text from her assistant. "Your mother wants to meet for brunch. Shall I confirm?" Eleanor groaned and rolled over. She'd come here for peace and quiet, not more family obligations, but she couldn't hide forever. "Tell her I'll call her later," Eleanor typed back. She needed coffee first, and air. The building had a small coffee shop in the lobby that served decent coffee and pastries. Nothing fancy, but it would do. Eleanor dressed quickly and headed downstairs. The lobby was busier in the morning, with residents leaving for work and delivery people coming and going. She was waiting in line at the coffee counter when she saw Marcus across the lobby, carrying a toolbox and talking to a young woman with a baby stroller. The woman looked frustrated, juggling a crying infant and several grocery bags that seemed about to fall. Marcus set down his toolbox and gently took the bags from her hands. "Let me help you with that," he said. "Thank you," the woman said, looking relieved. "I don't know why I thought I could manage all of this at once." Marcus carried the bags to the elevator and held the door while the woman maneuvered the stroller inside. Then he handed her the bags and stepped back. "Have a good day, Ms. Green," he said. Eleanor watched this small interaction with interest. Marcus had been kind without making a big show of it. He'd helped someone who needed help, then stepped back and let her handle the rest. The coffee line moved forward and Eleanor ordered her usual. When she turned around, Marcus was gone. Eleanor found a small table near the windows and sat down with her coffee and a blueberry muffin. She wasn't usually much of a breakfast person, but something about the morning felt different. Maybe it was the way the light came through the tall windows. Maybe it was the comfortable sounds of people starting their day. Or maybe it was the fact that she'd slept better last night than she had in weeks. Eleanor's phone buzzed. Another message from her assistant. "Daniel Price called the office. He said it was urgent." Eleanor sighed and deleted the message. Daniel's version of urgent usually meant he wanted something that would benefit him. She wasn't interested. Her phone rang. This time, it was her mother. "Eleanor, darling, where are you? I've been trying to reach you since yesterday." "I'm having breakfast, Mother. What do you need?" "I need to know why you're avoiding Daniel. He's quite concerned about you." Eleanor took a sip of her coffee and looked out the window. "Daniel and I are finished. I told you that last month." "Don't be dramatic. Every couple has rough patches." "This isn't a rough patch. This is me finally admitting that we're not right for each other." Helen Whitman made the disapproving sound that Eleanor had been hearing her whole life. "He's a good man from a good family. He adores you." "He adores the idea of me," Eleanor corrected. "There's a difference." "Eleanor, you're almost 30. You can't afford to be picky forever." The words stung because they were designed to sting. Eleanor's mother was an expert at finding sensitive spots and pressing them. "I have to go," Eleanor said. "I'll call you later." She ended the call and sat back in her chair, feeling suddenly tired again. Almost 30. Can't afford to be picky. Eleanor had heard variations of this conversation her entire adult life. Her mother's constant worry that Eleanor would end up alone. Her assumption that any decent man was better than no man at all. But Eleanor was already alone, even when she was with someone like Daniel. She'd spent 3 years in a relationship where she'd felt like she was playing a part in someone else's idea of her life. She was done with that. Eleanor finished her coffee and gathered her things. As she stood up, she saw Marcus again, this time talking to Frank near the elevator. Both men looked serious. Their conversation ended, and Marcus headed for the stairs. Eleanor found herself walking in the same direction. "Good morning," she said when she caught up with him. Marcus looked surprised to see her. "Morning. How did you sleep?" "Better than I expected." Eleanor meant it. "Thank you again for being so understanding last night." "Don't worry about it." They reached the elevator together. Marcus pushed the button and waited with her, even though Eleanor had noticed he usually took the stairs. "Are you staying long?" Marcus asked. "Just one more night, probably. I needed some space to think." The elevator arrived, and they stepped inside. Eleanor pressed the button for the 12th floor. "Can I ask you something?" Eleanor said as the elevator started moving. Marcus looked at her carefully. "Okay." "That woman with the baby, Ms. Green. You helped her with her groceries. She needed help. But you didn't have to. You could have just walked by." Marcus was quiet for a moment. "Why wouldn't I help?" The question was so simple and honest that Eleanor didn't know how to answer it. In her world, people helped when it benefited them somehow, when it made them look good or gained them something. Marcus had helped because someone needed help. That was it. The elevator reached the 12th floor. As the doors opened, Eleanor realized she didn't want the conversation to end. "I should let you get back to work," she said. "Actually," Marcus said, "there's something you should know. The elevator in the south wing has been acting up. If you need to use it this afternoon, be careful. The repair company is coming tomorrow." "Thank you for telling me." Marcus nodded and held the elevator door while Eleanor stepped into the hallway. As the doors started to close, Eleanor found herself saying, "Marcus?" The doors stopped. "Yeah?" "I'm glad I knocked on your door last night. Not the first time, the second time, when I apologized." Marcus looked at her for a long moment. "Me too," he said. The elevator doors closed, leaving Eleanor alone in the hallway. But for the first time in a long time, alone didn't feel lonely. The next morning brought new problems. Marcus was checking the water pressure in Unit 8A when his phone rang. Frank's number. "We've got a situation," Frank said without saying hello. "The south elevator is completely down. The repair company can't get here until this afternoon." Marcus finished his test and wiped his hands on his work towel. "How bad?" "Bad enough that some of the older residents can't get to their apartments. Mrs. Chen in 6B has groceries she can't carry up 6 flights." Marcus was already moving toward the stairs. "I'll handle it." "There's more. The Whitman family inspection got moved up. Helen Whitman is coming this afternoon." Marcus stopped walking. Helen Whitman was Eleanor's mother. He'd never met her, but Frank had mentioned her before. Old money, high expectations, not the kind of person who tolerated broken elevators. "Eleanor's still here," Marcus said. "I know, that might help, or it might make things worse." Marcus understood what Frank meant. Family business could get complicated, especially when repair schedules didn't cooperate with inspection schedules. "I'll make sure everything else is perfect," Marcus said. He spent the next 2 hours carrying groceries, packages, and even a small piece of furniture up the stairs for residents who couldn't manage the climb themselves. His back ached, but he didn't mind. This was part of the job he actually liked, helping people with real problems. Eleanor appeared on the 4th floor landing as Marcus was helping Mrs. Chen with her bags. "Here, let me help," Eleanor said, reaching for one of the grocery bags. Mrs. Chen looked surprised. Oh, you don't need to. I want to, Eleanor said simply. I'm Eleanor. I live in 12B. Temporarily, Mrs. Chen said, but she was smiling. I'm Mrs. Chen. Thank you, dear. Marcus watched Eleanor carry the bag upstairs without complaining about the climb, or worrying about her expensive clothes getting wrinkled. She made easy conversation with Mrs. Chen about the building and the neighborhood, asking genuine questions and listening to the answers. At Mrs. Chen's door, Eleanor handed over the groceries and asked if there was anything else she needed. You're very kind, Mrs. Chen said. Most of the young people here are too busy to stop and talk. After Mrs. Chen went inside, Eleanor and Marcus stood in the hallway together, both a little out of breath from the climb. The elevator's really broken? Eleanor asked. Until this afternoon, maybe longer. Eleanor frowned. That's going to be hard on people like Mrs. Chen? Marcus nodded. Most residents would complain about the inconvenience to them. Eleanor was thinking about an elderly woman she'd just met. Your mother's coming today, Marcus said. Eleanor's expression changed. Frank told you? He mentioned the inspection got moved up. Right, the inspection. Eleanor looked tired suddenly. She doesn't know I'm here. This should be interesting. They walked down the stairs together. Marcus noticed that Eleanor didn't seem worried about the inspection itself, just about seeing her mother. Is that going to be a problem? Marcus asked. Eleanor was quiet for a moment. My mother has very specific ideas about how things should be and who I should spend my time with. Marcus understood. He'd worked in buildings like this long enough to know how some families operated. Status mattered. Appearances mattered. The help was supposed to stay invisible. I can make myself scarce, Marcus said. You shouldn't have to. Eleanor stopped on the landing between the second and third floors. This is your building. You work here. You belong here more than I do. Marcus looked at her carefully. That's not how most people see it. Then most people are wrong. The words were simple, but they hit Marcus harder than Eleanor probably intended. When was the last time someone had said he belonged anywhere? They reached the lobby just as Frank was hanging up the phone. He looked stressed. Good news and bad news, Frank said. The repair company will be here at 2, but Helen Whitman moved her visit up to noon. Eleanor checked her watch. 11:30. She'll be here in 30 minutes, and the elevator's still broken, Eleanor said. She's going to have questions, Frank said. Marcus could see the worry in Frank's face. Helen Whitman's opinion mattered to the building's management company. Frank had been working here for 12 years, and he needed this job. What if she doesn't have to see the broken elevator? Eleanor said. Frank looked confused. How do we hide an elevator? We don't hide it, we just don't use it. Eleanor turned to Marcus. The inspection route, where does it usually go? Lobby, basement, then upstairs to check a few units, Marcus said. What if the inspection stayed on the lower floors today? You could show her the basement, the laundry room, the storage areas, all the systems that really matter. Frank considered this. She usually wants to see a few apartments. I'll offer mine, Eleanor said. 12B is in perfect condition, and if she's looking at my apartment, she won't be thinking about elevator problems. Marcus realized what Eleanor was doing. She was using her family connection to protect Frank's job, and she was doing it in a way that didn't make Frank feel like he owed her anything. That could work, Frank said slowly. It'll work, Eleanor said. Trust me, I know my mother. At exactly noon, a black sedan pulled up in front of the building. Marcus watched through the lobby windows as a woman stepped out. Tall, elegant, with silver hair pulled back in a perfect style. She wore a navy suit that probably cost more than Marcus made in a month. This was definitely Eleanor's mother. They had the same posture, the same way of moving with confidence. But where Eleanor seemed approachable, Helen Whitman looked like she was used to people stepping out of her way. "Showtime," Eleanor said quietly. Helen Whitman entered the lobby and looked around with sharp eyes. She noticed everything: the polished floors, the fresh flowers on the front desk, the way Frank hurried over to greet her. "Mrs. Whitman," Frank said. "Welcome to Wellington Arms. Mr. Delaney?" Helen's voice was crisp and professional. "I'd like to begin with the basement systems, then see a few units." "Of course. I have our superintendent here to show you the mechanical systems. This is Marcus Reed." Marcus stepped forward. "Mrs. Whitman?" Helen looked at him for exactly 2 seconds, long enough to register his presence, not long enough to really see him. "Fine, let's proceed." They were heading toward the stairs when Eleanor appeared from the coffee shop, carrying a cup and looking surprised. "Mother?" Helen stopped mid-step. "Eleanor? What are you doing here?" "I needed some quiet time to think. I didn't know you were coming today." Marcus could see the calculation in Helen's eyes. This wasn't part of her plan, but she couldn't very well ignore her daughter. "We'll talk after my inspection," Helen said. "Actually," Eleanor said, "would you like to see my apartment while you're here? I made some changes to the layout that you might find interesting." Helen paused. Marcus could tell she was curious despite herself. "I suppose that would be efficient," Helen said. The basement inspection went smoothly. Marcus showed Helen the boiler room, the electrical systems, and the water treatment equipment. He answered her questions directly and professionally, and Helen seemed satisfied with what she saw. They took the stairs to the 12th floor, where Eleanor was waiting outside her apartment. "This unit has the best view in the building," Eleanor said, opening her door. Helen stepped inside and looked around. The apartment was beautiful. High ceilings, hardwood floors, large windows overlooking the city. "The previous tenant had the kitchen completely redone," Eleanor said. "And the bathroom fixtures are all original but restored." Helen asked questions about square footage, recent upgrades, and tenant turnover. Eleanor answered smoothly, and Marcus realized she knew more about the building's business side than he'd expected. After 20 minutes, Helen seemed satisfied. "Everything appears to be in good order," she said to Frank. "We work hard to maintain standards," Frank said. "I can see that." Helen glanced at Marcus. "Your superintendent seems competent." It wasn't exactly praise, but it wasn't criticism either. Marcus nodded politely. "I'll walk you out," Eleanor said to her mother. In the elevator, Helen was quiet. As they reached the lobby, she finally spoke. "How long are you planning to stay here?" "I'm not sure," Eleanor said. "Why?" "You can't hide forever, Eleanor. Daniel has been calling the office. He's worried about you." Marcus was standing near the front desk, close enough to overhear. He tried to focus on his work, but the conversation was hard to ignore. "I'm not hiding," Eleanor said. "I'm thinking." "About what?" "About what I want my life to look like." Helen's voice got sharper. "Your life looks fine. You have a successful career, a good man who wants to marry you, and a family that loves you. What more do you need?" "I need to feel like I'm living my own life, not the life everyone else wants me to live." Marcus glanced over and saw Eleanor's face. She looked calm, but he could hear the tension underneath her words. "This is about Daniel, isn't it?" Helen said. "Eleanor, you're being foolish. Good men don't wait forever. Good men don't pressure women to marry them before they're ready." "Ready?" Helen's laugh had no warmth in it. "When will you be ready? When you're 40 And alone? Marcus saw Eleanor's hands clench. He wanted to step in somehow, but this wasn't his conversation. I'd rather be alone than be with someone who doesn't really see me, Eleanor said quietly. Helen stared at her daughter for a long moment. I don't know what's gotten into you lately, but this phase needs to end, soon. She turned and walked out the front door without saying goodbye. Eleanor stood in the lobby, watching her mother's car drive away. Marcus could see the hurt in her posture. Frank cleared his throat. Well, that went better than expected. Eleanor managed a small smile. She liked the apartment? She liked everything. Thanks to you, my job is safe for another few months. Eleanor nodded, but Marcus could tell she wasn't really listening. She was still thinking about her conversation with her mother. I should let you both get back to work, Eleanor said. She headed for the elevator, but Marcus found himself following her. Eleanor. She stopped and turned around. Are you okay? Marcus asked. The question seemed to surprise her. I'm fine. Marcus looked at her face. She wasn't fine. Your mother was pretty hard on you. Eleanor was quiet for a moment. She's worried about me. She thinks I'm making mistakes. Are you? I don't know, Eleanor said honestly. Maybe, but they're my mistakes to make. Marcus understood that feeling, the need to control your own life, even if you messed it up sometimes. For what it's worth, Marcus said, I think you handled that conversation well. Eleanor looked surprised again. You were listening? It was hard not to, and I think you were right. Good men shouldn't pressure women to marry them. Thank you, Eleanor said softly. That means more than you know. They stood there for a moment, not quite sure how to end the conversation. The elevator should be fixed soon, Marcus said finally. That's good. Mrs. Chen will be happy. Marcus smiled slightly. Eleanor was thinking about Mrs. Chen again. Not herself, not her problems with her mother. An elderly neighbor she'd met once. The elevator arrived with a soft ding. Eleanor stepped inside and pressed the button for the 12th floor. Marcus? She said as the doors started to close. Yeah? Thank you. For today. For helping with the inspection and everything else. The doors closed before Marcus could respond, but as he walked back to work, Marcus found himself thinking about Eleanor's conversation with her mother. About feeling pressured to live someone else's idea of your life. Marcus had spent 10 years living exactly the life he wanted. Quiet, simple, controlled. No one pressured him to be different. But for the first time, he wondered if choosing safety was the same thing as choosing what he really wanted. And he wondered what Eleanor Whitman really wanted, when no one else was telling her what she should want. The afternoon elevator repair took longer than expected. The technician found a second problem that needed fixing, which meant more delays and more frustrated residents. Marcus spent the day running up and down stairs, helping people and managing complaints. By 6 o'clock, he was exhausted. The elevator was finally working, but Marcus still had to check the emergency lighting system on the upper floors. Building regulations required monthly tests, and he was behind schedule. He was testing the lights on the 10th floor when he heard voices in the hallway. A man and a woman talking in urgent, hushed tones. Marcus tried to mind his own business, but the voices were getting louder. Completely unreasonable, Eleanor. I've been trying to reach you for days. Marcus recognized Eleanor's voice when she answered. I told you I needed time to think. Time to think about what? We've been together for 3 years. We have plans. The man's voice was smooth, educated, with an edge of irritation. This had to be Daniel, Eleanor's ex-boyfriend. Those were your plans, Eleanor said. You never asked what I wanted. I asked you to marry me. Isn't that what women want? Marcus winced. He'd heard that tone before, condescending, like Daniel was explaining something obvious to someone too slow to understand. Some women, maybe, Eleanor said. Not me. Not like that. Not like what? I offered you everything. Security, status, a good life. You offered me a role in your life, Eleanor said. You never wanted to know who I actually am. Marcus finished testing the light fixture and started to move down the hallway toward the stairs. He didn't want to eavesdrop, but he also didn't want to interrupt what was clearly a private conversation. This is ridiculous, Daniel said. You're throwing away 3 years because you have some fantasy about finding something better. I'm not looking for something better, Eleanor said. I'm looking for something real. Real? Daniel's laugh was harsh. What's not real about what we had? Marcus paused near the stairwell door. He could hear the frustration in Eleanor's voice, the way she was trying to stay calm while Daniel got more aggressive. We never had anything, Eleanor said. We had an arrangement. 2 people playing parts that looked good together. That's how adult relationships work, Eleanor. You grow up. You make practical choices. I don't want practical, Eleanor said, and Marcus could hear the pain underneath the words. I want someone who sees me, who knows me, who wants to know me. You want some romantic fairy tale, Daniel said. You're almost 30 years old. It's time to get realistic. Marcus had heard enough. He pushed open the stairwell door, making enough noise to announce his presence. Daniel and Eleanor were standing near the elevator. Daniel was tall, well-dressed, with the kind of confident posture that came from never being told no. Eleanor looked tired and frustrated. Sorry, Marcus said. Just finishing up the safety checks. Daniel barely glanced at him, but Eleanor looked relieved to see Marcus, like his presence meant the conversation had to end. We should finish this later, Eleanor said to Daniel. No, Daniel said. We're finishing it now. I'm tired of this dramatic nonsense. He grabbed Eleanor's arm, not roughly, but firmly enough to keep her from walking away. Marcus stopped moving toward the stairs. Let go of me, Eleanor said quietly. Not until you start making sense, Daniel said. I've invested 3 years in this relationship. I've been patient with your moods and your need for space. But this ends now. Marcus took a step closer. She asked you to let go. Daniel looked at Marcus for the first time, really looked at him. Marcus could see the calculation in Daniel's eyes, taking in the work clothes, the tool belt, the fact that Marcus was black. This is a private conversation, Daniel said. Not if she doesn't want to have it, Marcus said calmly. Daniel's grip on Eleanor's arm tightened. And who are you exactly? I'm the person telling you to let her go. For a moment, the hallway was completely quiet. Marcus could feel the tension building, but he kept his voice calm and his posture relaxed. He'd learned a long time ago that staying calm usually diffused situations like this. Eleanor pulled her arm free from Daniel's grip. Thank you, Marcus. Daniel's face flushed red. Are you serious right now? You're choosing the building maintenance guy over me? I'm choosing myself, Eleanor said. And I'm asking you to leave. Daniel looked back and forth between Eleanor and Marcus, like he couldn't believe what was happening. This is insane, Daniel said. Your mother warned me you were having some kind of breakdown, but this is beyond anything I imagined. My mother doesn't know anything about what I want, Eleanor said. Apparently neither do I, Daniel said bitterly. 3 years, Eleanor. 3 years of my life wasted on someone who can't appreciate what she has. He turned and walked toward the elevator, then stopped and looked back. When you come to your senses, don't expect me to be waiting, Daniel said. I'm done with this. The elevator doors closed behind him, leaving Eleanor and Marcus alone in the hallway. Eleanor leaned back against the wall and closed her eyes. I'm sorry you had to see that. Are you okay? Marcus asked. Eleanor opened her eyes and looked at him. I think so. Yes. Actually, I think I'm better than okay. Marcus could see that she meant it. Eleanor looked relieved, like she'd been carrying something heavy and had finally set it down. He seemed angry, Marcus said. He was. He's not used to people saying no to him. Eleanor pushed herself off the wall. Thank you for stepping in. You didn't have to. Yes, I did, Marcus said. Eleanor looked at him curiously. Why? Marcus thought about how to answer that question. Why had he stepped in? Because Daniel was pressuring Eleanor? Because she'd looked uncomfortable? Because Marcus didn't like the way Daniel had grabbed her arm? All of those things were true. But there was something else, something Marcus wasn't quite ready to put into words. Because it was the right thing to do, he said finally. Eleanor smiled. You know, that's the second time today someone's told me they did something because it was right. Not because it was smart or profitable or practical, just because it was right. Who was the first person? You, Eleanor said. Earlier, when you helped Mrs. Chen, I asked why you helped people, and you asked why you wouldn't. Marcus remembered that conversation. It felt like days ago instead of hours. I guess I don't think about it much, Marcus said. Helping people, I mean. It's just what you do. Not everyone thinks that way, Eleanor said. Most people in my world help when it benefits them somehow. You help because people need help. Marcus felt uncomfortable with the praise. I'm just doing my job. No, Eleanor said. You're being kind? There's a difference. They stood there for a moment, both aware that something had shifted between them. Marcus felt it, a deepening of whatever connection had started when Eleanor knocked on his door. But Marcus also felt the familiar voice in his head, warning him to be careful, to keep his distance, to remember why he'd chosen to be alone. I should finish the safety checks, Marcus said. Of course, Eleanor said. Thank you again for everything. Marcus nodded and headed for the stairs. But as he walked down to the 9th floor, he found himself thinking about what Eleanor had said to Daniel. I want someone who sees me, who knows me, who wants to know me. Marcus understood that feeling better than Eleanor probably realized. The longing to be known by someone, to have someone see past the surface to who you really were. He'd given up on that feeling 10 years ago. But listening to Eleanor fight for it made Marcus remember why he'd wanted it in the first place. The next few days passed quietly. Too quietly, Marcus thought. Eleanor had extended her stay at Wellington Arms, but she seemed different now, more relaxed. She'd started taking morning walks around the neighborhood and spending time in the building's small courtyard garden. Marcus found himself looking for her more often than he should. He told himself it was just concern, making sure she was okay after the confrontation with Daniel. But he knew it was more than that. On Thursday afternoon, Marcus was replacing a broken faucet in Unit 4C when Mrs. Alvarez appeared in the doorway. Marcus, honey, you need to see something, she said. Ruth never asked for help unless it was important. Marcus finished tightening the faucet and followed her to the courtyard. Eleanor was sitting on a bench near the small fountain, reading a book. But that wasn't what Ruth wanted him to see. Sitting next to Eleanor was Mrs. Chen, showing her photos on her phone and laughing about something. On Eleanor's other side sat Tasha Green, the single mother Marcus had helped with her groceries. Tasha's baby was sleeping in a stroller, and Tasha looked more relaxed than Marcus had seen her in months. "Look at that," Ruth said softly. "When's the last time you saw folks from different floors actually talking to each other?" Marcus had to admit it was unusual. Most residents of Wellington Arms lived parallel lives, polite but separate. Eleanor had somehow created a small community in the courtyard. "She's been doing this for 3 days," Ruth continued. "Just sitting out here reading her book. People started joining her. Now it's like a little social hour every afternoon." Marcus watched Eleanor listen to something Mrs. Chen was saying. She was really listening, asking questions, responding with genuine interest. "You know what I think?" Ruth said. Marcus smiled. Ruth always had opinions. "What do you think?" "I think that girl is lonely, and I think she's figuring out that money can't fix lonely." Marcus knew Ruth was right. Eleanor had everything: wealth, beauty, education, a family business that gave her purpose. But she'd been living in a world where connections were based on status and usefulness, not genuine affection. "She seems happier," Marcus said. "She does, but happiness is fragile." Ruth gave Marcus a meaningful look. "Especially when you're trying something new." Marcus understood what Ruth was really saying. Eleanor was taking risks, opening herself up to people she wouldn't normally talk to. That took courage, but it also left her vulnerable. "I should get back to work," Marcus said. "Should," Ruth repeated. "Always should with you. What do you want to do?" Marcus didn't answer, but Ruth smiled like she already knew. That evening, Marcus was finishing his daily rounds when he saw light coming from under Eleanor's door. He could hear music playing softly, something classical and peaceful. Without really deciding to, Marcus knocked. Eleanor opened the door wearing jeans and a simple sweater. Her hair was down, and she looked younger somehow. More like herself. "Hi," she said, seeming pleased to see him. "Hi, I was wondering, how's your week been, since Daniel left?" Eleanor stepped aside to let him in. "Better. Much better, actually." Marcus had never been inside Eleanor's apartment when she was really living in it. The expensive furniture was still there, but Eleanor had added small touches that made it feel more personal. Books stacked on the coffee table, a throw blanket on the couch, fresh flowers in a simple glass vase. "Can I get you something to drink?" Eleanor asked. "I have coffee, tea, water." "Coffee would be good." Eleanor moved around the kitchen easily, like she'd been living there for months instead of days. She made coffee in a simple French press and handed Marcus a warm mug. "Thank you," he said. They sat on the couch, not quite touching, but closer than they'd ever been in a private space. "I wanted to thank you again," Eleanor said, "for Tuesday night, with Daniel." "You already thanked me." "I know, but I keep thinking about it." Eleanor wrapped her hands around her coffee mug. "He grabbed my arm, and for a second I felt small, helpless. And then you were there." Marcus set down his coffee. "He shouldn't have touched you like that." "No, he shouldn't have. But lots of people would have walked by, minded their own business." "You're not business," Marcus said. Then he stopped, surprised by his own words. Eleanor looked at him carefully. "What am I?" The question hung in the air between them. Marcus felt like they were standing at the edge of something important, something that would change everything if they stepped forward. "I don't know," Marcus said honestly. "But you're not business." Eleanor smiled. "Good, because you're not business either." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment. Marcus found himself really looking at Eleanor's apartment, noticing details he'd missed before. A small stack of notebooks on the side table. A laptop open to what looked like architectural drawings. "What are you working on?" Marcus asked. Eleanor followed his gaze to the laptop. "Actually, I wanted to ask your opinion about something. I've been thinking about Wellington Arms." Marcus felt a familiar tension. In his experience, when rich people thought about buildings, it usually meant changes that made life harder for the people who actually lived and worked there. "What kind of thinking?" he asked carefully. "Good thinking, I hope." Eleanor pulled the laptop over and showed Marcus the screen. "Look at this." The screen showed floor plans and renovation sketches, but not the kind Marcus had expected. These drawings showed improvements to common spaces, better lighting in the laundry room, updated seating areas in the lobby, a community garden space on the roof. "My family's been talking about updating Wellington Arms for years," Eleanor explained. "But all their ideas focus on raising rent and attracting different tenants. Wealthier tenants." Marcus had heard rumors about this. Building owners across the city were pushing out long-term residents to make room for people who could pay higher rents. "These drawings show a different approach," Eleanor continued. "Improvements that make life better for the people who already live here." Marcus looked more closely at the plans. The ideas were thoughtful, practical. New washing machines in the laundry room, better storage for packages, a small children's play area in the courtyard. "This would cost money," Marcus said. "Less than you'd think, and the return on investment would come from keeping good tenants long-term instead of constantly turning over units." Marcus was impressed despite himself. Eleanor understood both the human side and the business side of what made a building work. "What does your family think about these ideas?" Marcus asked. Eleanor's expression changed. "They don't know about them yet." "But you're going to tell them?" "I'm going to try." Eleanor closed the laptop. "The question is whether they'll listen to me." Marcus heard the uncertainty in her voice. Eleanor was used to her family dismissing her ideas, especially when those ideas prioritized people over profits. "For what it's worth," Marcus said, "I think these are good ideas. Really good." "Thank you. That means a lot coming from someone who actually works in the building." They talked for another hour about the renovation plans, about the building's history, about the residents Marcus had gotten to know over the years. Eleanor asked detailed questions and really listened to the answers. As the evening wound down, Marcus realized he'd never had a conversation like this before. Someone asking for his opinion not because they had to, but because they genuinely valued what he thought. "I should let you get some sleep," Marcus said, standing up. "Thank you for coming by," Eleanor said, "and for looking at the plans. Your input will make them better." At the door, they stood facing each other. Marcus felt that same pull he'd been feeling for days, the urge to stay closer to Eleanor, to learn more about her, to let her learn more about him. But 10 years of careful distance was hard to overcome. "Good night, Eleanor," Marcus said. "Good night." Marcus walked back to his apartment feeling unsettled in a way that wasn't entirely unpleasant. Eleanor was changing his carefully ordered world, and he wasn't sure how he felt about that. But for the first time in a long time, Marcus fell asleep thinking about tomorrow instead of trying not to think about anything at all. Friday morning brought rain and a phone call that changed everything. Marcus was checking the basement storm drains when Frank found him. "We have a problem," Frank said. "A big one." Marcus straightened up. Frank looked genuinely worried, which meant this was serious. "What kind of problem?" "Helen Whitman called this morning. She's been thinking about our conversation the other day, and she wants to accelerate some changes to the building." Marcus felt his stomach drop. "Changes like what?" "Like renovating half the units and raising the rent by 40%. This was exactly what Marcus had been afraid of. Helen Whitman had seen the building's potential and decided to cash in on it. "When?" Marcus asked. "She wants to start next month. She's sending a construction crew to assess the work needed." Marcus thought about Mrs. Chen, struggling to carry groceries up 6 flights. About Tasha Green, working 2 jobs to afford her small apartment. About Ruth Alvarez, who'd been living at Wellington Arms for 15 years. None of them could afford a 40% rent increase. They'd have to move, probably to neighborhoods farther from their jobs and support systems. "What about the residents?" Marcus asked. Frank's expression was grim. "She's offering to help them find places in other buildings the family owns, buildings in less desirable areas." "That's not help," Marcus said. "That's displacement." "I know, but it's legal, and it's profitable." Marcus felt anger building in his chest. This was how it always worked. Rich people saw an opportunity to make more money, and working people paid the price. "Does Eleanor know?" Marcus asked. Frank shook his head. "Her mother asked me not to mention it until the plans are finalized. Apparently, Eleanor has been difficult lately about family business decisions." Marcus understood. Eleanor's renovation plans focused on improving life for current residents. Helen's plans focused on replacing them entirely. "I'm sorry, Marcus," Frank said. "I know this affects you too. If half the building is under construction, we probably won't need a full-time superintendent." Marcus nodded. He'd expected this. When buildings got renovated for wealthy tenants, they usually hired management companies instead of keeping individual superintendents. "How long do I have?" Marcus asked. "A few months, probably. Long enough to help with the transition." Marcus spent the rest of the morning thinking about his options. He had some money saved. He could find another job, maybe in a different building or a different neighborhood. But leaving Wellington Arms meant leaving the community he'd built here. Leaving Ruth and Mrs. Chen and Tasha. Leaving Frank, who'd been a good boss and a decent friend. Leaving Eleanor. The thought surprised him with its intensity. When had Eleanor become someone he couldn't imagine leaving? That afternoon, Marcus was fixing a leaky pipe in the basement when he heard footsteps on the stairs. Eleanor appeared, carrying 2 cups of coffee. "I brought you this," she said, offering him one of the cups. "Ruth said you'd been working down here all day." Marcus accepted the coffee gratefully. "Thank you." Eleanor looked around the basement with interest. "I've never been down here before. It's bigger than I expected." "Most people never see this part of the building," Marcus said. "That's a shame. This is where everything important happens, isn't it? All the systems that keep everyone comfortable upstairs." Marcus nodded. Eleanor understood something that most people missed. The building was like a body, and the basement was its heart. Everything else depended on what happened down here. "You seem upset about something," Eleanor said. Marcus looked at her carefully. Frank had asked him not to say anything about Helen's plans. But Eleanor had been honest with him about her own renovation ideas. Didn't she deserve to know what her mother was planning? "Your mother called Frank this morning," Marcus said. Eleanor's expression changed. "About what?" Marcus told her everything. The rent increases, the displaced residents, the construction timeline. Eleanor's face grew more troubled with each detail. "She can't do that," Eleanor said when Marcus finished. "She can, actually. It's her building." "But these people have been living here for years. This is their home." Marcus could see Eleanor really understanding for the first time what her family's wealth meant for people like Mrs. Chen and Ruth. Money wasn't just numbers on a balance sheet. It was the difference between stability and displacement for dozens of families. "What about your renovation plans?" Marcus asked. Eleanor looked frustrated. "She must have decided my ideas weren't profitable enough." They sat in silence for a moment. Marcus could see Eleanor thinking, working through the implications of her mother's decision. "There has to be something I can do," Eleanor said finally. "Like what?" "I don't know. Talk to her. Convince her that my approach would work better long term." Marcus wanted to believe that would work. But he'd seen how Helen Whitman operated. She didn't strike him as someone who changed her mind easily. "Your mother seemed pretty set on her plans," Marcus said gently. "She is, until someone shows her a better option." Eleanor stood up suddenly. "Marcus, would you help me with something?" "What kind of something?" "I want to put together a real proposal. Numbers, timelines, cost comparisons. Something that proves my renovation approach would be more profitable than hers." Marcus felt a spark of hope. "You think that would work?" "I think it's worth trying. But I'd need help with the details. Someone who knows the building, knows the residents, knows what improvements would actually matter." Marcus understood. Eleanor was asking him to help her fight for Wellington Arms and everyone who lived here. "What would that involve?" Marcus asked. "Research, planning, maybe some late nights putting together presentations." Eleanor was offering him a chance to have a real voice in what happened to his building, his community. But she was also asking him to step outside the safe boundaries he'd built around his life. Working closely with Eleanor would mean spending time together, getting to know each other better, taking emotional risks he'd been avoiding for 10 years. Marcus looked at Eleanor's face, seeing the determination there. She was willing to fight her own family to protect people she barely knew. How could he do less? "Okay," Marcus said. "I'll help." Eleanor smiled, and Marcus felt something shift inside his chest. For the first time since Frank had delivered the bad news, Marcus felt like there might be hope. "Thank you," Eleanor said. "We're going to save this place." Marcus wanted to believe her, but as they walked upstairs together, he couldn't shake the feeling that they were taking on forces much bigger and more powerful than they were. Still, watching Eleanor's determined expression, Marcus thought they might have a chance. If they could work together. If they could trust each other. If Marcus could overcome 10 years of keeping everyone at a distance. It was a lot of ifs. But for Eleanor, for Wellington Arms, for the community they were both starting to care about, Marcus was willing to try. They worked through the weekend. Saturday afternoon found them in Eleanor's apartment, surrounded by building plans, financial documents, and renovation cost estimates. Marcus had never seen this side of Eleanor before. Focused, analytical, completely absorbed in solving a complex problem. "Look at this," Eleanor said, pointing to a spreadsheet on her laptop. "If we renovate units gradually as they become vacant, we can improve the building without displacing current residents." Marcus studied the numbers. "That would take longer to see a return on investment. But it would be sustainable, and it would build goodwill with long-term tenants." They'd been having conversations like this for hours. Eleanor would propose an idea, Marcus would point out practical challenges, and together they'd find solutions that addressed both concerns. It felt natural, working with her like this. Eleanor respected his knowledge of the building, and Marcus was impressed by her business sense and her genuine concern for the residents. "What about the community spaces?" Marcus asked. Eleanor pulled up another document. "The roof garden would cost about $15,000 to build, but it would be a selling point for new tenants. And the improved laundry facilities would reduce maintenance calls." "Mrs. Chen would love having a garden space where she could grow herbs," Marcus said. Eleanor smiled. "See, it's not just about money. It's about making people's lives better." As the afternoon turned to evening, they ordered dinner and kept working. Marcus found himself relaxing in ways he'd forgotten were possible. Eleanor was easy to talk to, quick to understand new concepts, and genuinely interested in his perspective on things. "Can I ask you something?" Eleanor said as they took a break to eat. Marcus nodded, though he felt his usual wariness return. Personal questions always made him nervous. "You know so much about this building, about construction and maintenance and resident relations. Have you ever thought about doing something bigger? Running a building management company, maybe? The question surprised Marcus. I like what I do. I know, but you could help more people, improve more buildings. Your ideas about community-focused building management could change how the whole industry works. Marcus had never thought about his work that way. He'd always seen himself as someone who fixed things, not someone who could change systems. I don't have the education for something like that, Marcus said. You have something better. You have experience, and you understand what actually matters to people who live in buildings. Eleanor's words stayed with Marcus as they returned to work. She saw potential in him that he'd never seen in himself. By 9 o'clock, they had a comprehensive proposal ready. Renovation timelines that preserved community, cost projections that showed long-term profitability, detailed plans for improvements that would benefit both residents and the building's bottom line. This is good, Eleanor said, reviewing their final document. Really good. Marcus felt proud of what they'd accomplished. When will you present it to your mother? Eleanor's expression grew more serious. Tomorrow, she's coming for another inspection, and I'm going to ask for a family meeting. Are you nervous? Terrified, Eleanor said honestly. My mother doesn't like it when I challenge her decisions, especially in front of other family members. Marcus could see the anxiety in Eleanor's posture. She was putting herself at risk to protect people she'd only recently gotten to know. You don't have to do this, Marcus said gently. Eleanor looked at him with surprise. Yes, I do. These people are counting on us. The word us hit Marcus harder than it should have. When had he become part of an us with Eleanor? What if it doesn't work? Marcus asked. What if your mother says no? Then at least we tried, and maybe we can find another way. Eleanor's optimism was both inspiring and concerning. Marcus had seen how the world worked. Money usually won over idealism. Power usually beat good intentions. But looking at Eleanor's determined face, Marcus found himself wanting to believe that this time might be different. Thank you, Eleanor said suddenly, for helping with this, for trusting me enough to try. Thank you for fighting for people you barely know. I know them better now, Eleanor said. Ruth makes the best coffee in the building. Mrs. Chen used to be a math teacher. Tasha is studying nursing while working 2 jobs to support her daughter. Marcus realized that Eleanor wasn't just fighting for abstract principles. She was fighting for specific people she'd grown to care about. And what about you? Eleanor asked softly. What should I know about Marcus Reed? The question caught Marcus off guard. Eleanor had shared so much about herself, her family, her struggles with feeling disconnected from her own life. But Marcus had revealed almost nothing. I'm not that interesting, Marcus said. I don't believe that. They looked at each other across the coffee table covered with their work. Marcus felt that familiar pull toward Eleanor, stronger now after spending so much time with her. But he also felt the familiar fear, the voice that warned him not to get too close, not to trust too much, not to forget why he'd chosen to be alone. I should go, Marcus said, standing up. Let you get some rest before tomorrow. Eleanor looked disappointed, but didn't argue. Of course. Thank you again for everything. At the door, Eleanor touched his arm gently. Marcus, whatever happens tomorrow, I'm glad we tried this together. Marcus nodded and headed back to his apartment. But as he lay in bed that night, he couldn't stop thinking about Eleanor's question. What should she know about Marcus Reed? That he'd been hurt badly enough to stop trusting people for 10 years. That he'd built his entire life around avoiding the kind of emotional risk Eleanor represented. that despite all his careful defenses, she was getting closer to him than anyone had in a decade. That he was starting to care about her in ways that scared him more than any building emergency ever could. Marcus stared at the ceiling and wondered if tomorrow would bring the end of Eleanor's fight for Wellington Arms, and whether it would also bring the end of whatever was growing between them. One way or another, Marcus suspected that after tomorrow, nothing would be the same. Sunday morning arrived gray and cold. Marcus woke up feeling like something important was about to happen, something that would change everything. Eleanor was meeting with her family at 10 o'clock. In 2 hours, they would find out if their weekend of work had been worth anything. Marcus got dressed and went to check the building systems, but his mind wasn't on his work. He kept thinking about Eleanor, probably getting ready upstairs, preparing to fight her own family for people she'd known less than 2 weeks. At 9:30, Marcus was in the lobby when Eleanor came downstairs. She wore a navy suit and carried a leather briefcase, but Marcus could see the nervousness in her shoulders. "Ready?" Marcus asked. "As ready as I can be." Eleanor managed a small smile. "Wish me luck?" "You don't need luck. You have the better plan." "I hope you're right." Eleanor's mother arrived exactly on time, followed by 2 other cars. Marcus watched through the lobby windows as well-dressed people emerged and gathered on the sidewalk. The Whitman family in full force. He recognized Helen Whitman immediately. The other faces were unfamiliar, but they all had the same polished, confident look. People used to getting their way. Eleanor met them in the lobby, greeting each person with professional politeness. Marcus could see the tension in the way she held herself. "Shall we use the conference room?" Eleanor asked. Frank had set up the small conference room off the lobby for the meeting. Marcus wasn't invited, but he could see them through the glass doors. For the next hour, Marcus tried to focus on work while keeping one eye on the conference room. He could see Eleanor presenting documents, pointing to charts and plans. Her family members asked questions, passed papers around, looked serious. Marcus couldn't hear what was being said, but he could read the body language. Eleanor was passionate and persuasive. Her family was skeptical, but listening. Then something changed. Helen Whitman's voice got louder. Eleanor's posture became more defensive. One of the men started shaking his head before Eleanor had finished talking. Marcus could see the meeting falling apart. 20 minutes later, the conference room door opened. The Whitman family emerged, looking irritated. Eleanor followed, her face carefully blank. Helen approached Frank, who was standing near the front desk. "Mr. Delaney, please proceed with the original renovation plans we discussed. I want construction bids by the end of the week." "Of course, Mrs. Whitman," Frank said. The family members left without saying goodbye to Eleanor. She stood in the lobby watching their cars drive away, her shoulders sagging with defeat. Marcus walked over to her. "I'm sorry." Eleanor looked at him with tired eyes. "They wouldn't even consider it. My uncle called it idealistic nonsense. My mother said I was being naive about how business works." "You tried. You fought for what was right." "I failed." Eleanor's voice was flat. "Mrs. Chen is going to lose her apartment. Tasha won't be able to afford the new rent. Ruth will have to move away from the place she's called home for 15 years. Marcus wanted to comfort her, but he didn't know how. He'd never been good at finding the right words when people were hurting. "And you'll lose your job," Eleanor added quietly. Marcus had almost forgotten about that part. With everything else falling apart, losing his own position seemed less important. "I'll find something else," Marcus said. Eleanor looked at him with an expression Marcus couldn't read. "Will you? Will you really?" The question surprised him. "What do you mean?" I mean, will you find another job like this one? Another community like this one? Another place where you can help people and belong somewhere? Marcus realized Eleanor understood something he'd been trying not to think about. Wellington Arms wasn't just his job, it was his home. The residents weren't just his responsibility, they were his community. Leaving would mean starting over completely, building new connections from scratch. At his age, with his history of keeping people at distance, that might not happen again. I don't know, Marcus said honestly. Eleanor nodded like she'd expected that answer. I'm sorry, Marcus. I'm sorry I got your hopes up. I'm sorry I made you think we could change anything. She headed for the elevator, leaving Marcus alone in the lobby with the weight of everything that was about to end. The next few days passed in a blur of painful normalcy. Construction assessors came and went, measuring rooms and taking notes. Frank fielded calls from nervous residents who'd heard rumors about rent increases. Marcus continued his daily maintenance work, but everything felt temporary now. Eleanor had retreated to her apartment and stopped joining the afternoon gatherings in the courtyard. Mrs. Chen asked Marcus where she'd gone, and Marcus didn't know what to say. On Wednesday evening, Marcus was replacing a burnt-out light bulb in the stairwell when he heard voices above him. Eleanor and someone else, talking in the hallway outside her apartment. Marcus recognized the second voice immediately. Daniel. I heard about the family meeting, Daniel was saying. Your mother told me you made quite a scene. I presented a business proposal, Eleanor replied. It wasn't a scene. Eleanor, come on, you've been hiding out in this building for 2 weeks, playing house with the working-class people. Your family is worried about you. Marcus stopped working and listened more carefully. He shouldn't eavesdrop, but something in Daniel's tone made him uneasy. I'm not playing house, Eleanor said. I'm trying to do the right thing. The right thing is coming back to reality. Your mother has agreed to give you one more chance to come to your senses. What kind of chance? Marcus could hear the wariness in Eleanor's voice. Marry me, Daniel said. Show your family that you're stable, that you can make good decisions. They'll put you in charge of the Wellington Arms project as a wedding gift. And then what? I implement my mother's renovation plans? You implement the plans that make the most business sense, like an adult. Marcus felt anger rising in his chest. Daniel was offering Eleanor everything she wanted, control over Wellington Arms, the chance to protect the residents, but only if she married him and gave up her own principles. Think about it, Eleanor. You could save this building and everyone in it. All you have to do is stop this ridiculous rebellion and marry the man you were supposed to marry anyway. Marcus held his breath, waiting for Eleanor's answer. Get out, Eleanor said quietly. What? Get out of my building, now. Eleanor, be reasonable. I said get out. Marcus heard rapid footsteps, then the sound of the stairwell door opening and closing hard. A few moments later, Marcus heard another sound. Eleanor crying. The sound hit Marcus like a physical blow. Eleanor had been strong through everything, standing up to her mother, fighting for the building, accepting defeat with dignity. But Daniel's cruel offer had finally broken something in her. Marcus climbed the stairs quietly and found Eleanor sitting on the floor outside her apartment, her back against the wall, tears streaming down her face. She looked up when she saw him. Did you hear all of that? Marcus nodded and sat down beside her on the floor. He offered me everything I wanted, Eleanor said through her tears. The building, the residents' safety, the chance to prove my plans would work. All I had to do was marry someone who doesn't see me as a real person. You did the right thing, Marcus said. Did I? Mrs. Chen is still going to lose her apartment. Tasha is still going to have to move. You're still going to lose your job. Eleanor wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. Maybe Daniel is right. Maybe I should have taken the deal. No. Marcus's voice was firm. You shouldn't have to trade your life for other people's safety. That's not fair to you. Eleanor looked at him with surprise. Since when do you care about what's fair to me? The question hung in the air between them. Marcus realized Eleanor was asking him to be honest about something he'd been avoiding for days. Since I started caring about you, Marcus said quietly. Eleanor's tears stopped. What? Marcus took a deep breath. This was the moment he'd been dreading and hoping for in equal measure. I care about you, Eleanor, more than I should, more than I meant to. Marcus, I haven't cared about someone this way in 10 years, Marcus continued. I didn't think I could anymore. But you changed something in me. Eleanor was staring at him with an expression Marcus couldn't read. I know I'm not the kind of man you're supposed to be with, Marcus said. I know your family would never accept me. I know I don't have anything to offer you except... Eleanor leaned forward and kissed him. It was soft and gentle and completely unexpected. Marcus felt 10 years of careful control dissolve in an instant. When they broke apart, Eleanor rested her forehead against his. You have everything to offer me, she whispered. You see me, you know me, you want to know me. Marcus remembered her saying those same words to Daniel, describing what she wanted in a relationship. Eleanor, Marcus said carefully, what are we doing? I don't know, Eleanor said. But I know I don't want to stop. They sat there in the hallway, holding each other, while Marcus tried to process what had just happened. Eleanor had chosen him. Not Daniel, with his ultimatums and his family connections. Not the safe path or the practical path. She had chosen Marcus. What happens now? Marcus asked. Eleanor was quiet for a long moment. I don't know, she said finally. But whatever happens, we figure it out together. They didn't have long to figure anything out. The next morning, Marcus was in the basement checking the heating system when Frank came down, with a grim expression. Construction starts Monday, Frank said. They want to begin with the units on floors 3 through 6. That's Mrs. Chen's floor, Marcus said. I know. She got her notice this morning. 60 days to find a new place. Marcus felt sick. Mrs. Chen was 73 years old, living on a fixed income. Finding an affordable apartment in the city would be nearly impossible for her. What about the other residents? Marcus asked. Notices go out today. Anyone who can't afford the new rent has 60 days. Frank looked as unhappy as Marcus felt. I'm sorry, Marcus. I tried to convince them to phase the construction more slowly, but Helen Whitman wants this done fast. Marcus nodded. He'd expected this, but that didn't make it easier to hear. When do you need me to leave? Marcus asked. End of next month. The new management company takes over in December. 6 weeks. Marcus had 6 weeks to find a new job, a new apartment, a new life. And somehow, in the middle of all that change, he had to figure out what was happening with Eleanor. Marcus spent the morning helping residents understand their notices. Mrs. Chen cried when she read hers. Tasha looked panicked, already calculating whether she could afford moving costs on top of everything else. By afternoon, the courtyard was full of worried voices and anxious conversations. The small community Eleanor had helped create was falling apart. Eleanor appeared around 3 o'clock, carrying a folder full of papers. She looked determined in a way Marcus hadn't seen since before the family meeting. I have an idea, she announced to the gathered residents. Mrs. Chen looked up hopefully. What kind of idea, dear? A legal idea. Eleanor opened her folder and pulled out several documents. I've been researching tenant protection laws, There are regulations about how much notice landlords have to give for major construction projects. Marcus felt a spark of hope. What kind of regulations? 90 days minimum for projects that will displace residents for more than 2 weeks. The notices you got today only give you 60 days. Ruth Alvarez leaned forward. What does that mean? It means the construction can't start on schedule, Eleanor said, which gives us time to explore other options. What other options? Tasha asked. Eleanor looked around the group. I can't promise anything yet, but I'm working on something. Something that might save your homes. The residents peppered Eleanor with questions, but she was careful not to make promises she couldn't keep. She just asked for their trust and their patience. After the crowd dispersed, Marcus approached Eleanor. What are you really planning? He asked. Eleanor smiled, and Marcus saw something familiar in her expression. The same determined look she'd worn when she decided to fight her family's original renovation plans. I'm planning to buy Wellington Arms, Eleanor said. Marcus stared at her. What? I have a trust fund, money my grandmother left me that I've never touched. It's enough to make an offer on the building. Eleanor, you can't. Why not? I love this place. I love the people here. And I have a business plan that proves it can be profitable with the right management approach. Marcus felt overwhelmed. Your family will never sell to you. They will if I make them an offer they can't refuse. Eleanor's eyes sparkled with mischief. Slightly above market value, cash deal, quick closing, pure business. What about your family? What about your relationship with them? Eleanor was quiet for a moment. I've been trying to earn their respect for 29 years. Maybe it's time I stopped caring whether I have it. Marcus realized Eleanor was proposing to risk everything, her family relationships, her inheritance, her future, to save a building and its residents. Are you sure about this? Marcus asked. I'm sure I want to try. Eleanor took his hands. But I can't do it alone. I need someone who knows the building, who understands the residents, who can help me manage it the right way. You want me to stay? I want you to be my partner, in the building and… Eleanor paused. In everything else, if you want that too. Marcus felt like the ground was shifting under his feet. Eleanor was offering him everything he'd been afraid to want. Meaningful work, real partnership, love. But she was also asking him to take the biggest risk of his life. I need to think about this, Marcus said. Eleanor nodded. Of course, take all the time you need. But as Marcus walked away, he realized he didn't need time to think. He needed time to find the courage to say yes. That night, Marcus couldn't sleep. He walked around his small apartment, looking at the space he'd called home for 8 years. No photos on the walls, no personal touches. Nothing that couldn't be packed in a few hours. He'd built this life deliberately. Simple, contained, safe. No complications, no risks, no chance of being hurt the way he'd been hurt 10 years ago. But also, no chance of the kind of happiness Eleanor was offering. Marcus made himself a cup of coffee and sat at his small kitchen table. For the first time in years, he let himself remember the woman who had broken his trust so completely. Jasmine. Beautiful, confident, seemingly interested in the quiet building superintendent she'd met when her upscale apartment had a plumbing problem. For 6 months, Marcus had believed she cared about him. They'd spent evenings together talking about their dreams. She'd made him feel seen and valued and loved, until the night he'd overheard her on the phone with a friend, laughing about her charity case boyfriend, explaining how dating Marcus made her feel better about herself, like she was doing good deeds. He's so grateful for any attention, Jasmine had said. It's actually kind of sweet how little he expects. Marcus had packed his things that night and moved out of the apartment they'd been sharing. Jasmine had seemed genuinely surprised when he broke up with her, like she couldn't understand why her charity work comment had hurt him. That was when Marcus had made his decision. Never again. Never trust someone who lived in a different world. Never believe that someone with options would choose him for the right reasons. For 10 years, that decision had protected him, but it had also isolated him. Marcus finished his coffee and looked around his apartment again. He could keep living this safe, quiet life. Find another building, another basement apartment, another community to serve while keeping himself separate from it. Or he could trust Eleanor. Risk believing that she saw him as a partner, not a charity case. Take the chance that what they had together was real. The thought terrified him. But for the first time in 10 years, the thought of staying safe terrified him more. Marcus picked up his phone and texted Eleanor, "I'm in. Let's save this place." Her response came immediately. "Really?" Marcus smiled and typed back, "Really? Partners?" "Partners," Eleanor replied. "In everything." Marcus set down his phone and looked around his apartment one more time. Tomorrow, everything would change. He would stop hiding behind his maintenance duties and start building something bigger with Eleanor. He would risk trusting someone again. For the first time in 10 years, Marcus fell asleep thinking about the future instead of trying not to think at all. The next 3 weeks passed in a whirlwind of legal paperwork, financial negotiations, and family drama. Eleanor's offer to buy Wellington Arms created exactly the chaos she'd expected. Helen Whitman was furious about being outmaneuvered by her own daughter. The rest of the family demanded emergency meetings to discuss Eleanor's impulsive decision. But Eleanor's offer was solid, her financing was legitimate, and her timeline was faster than any other potential buyer could match. Most importantly, the existing residents were protected. Eleanor's purchase contract included guarantees that current tenants could stay at their existing rent levels for at least 2 years. Marcus worked 18-hour days, helping Eleanor understand every detail of building operations. They reviewed maintenance schedules, vendor contracts, resident needs, and long-term improvement plans. They also spent quiet evenings together, talking about their hopes for the building and for themselves. Marcus found himself opening up in ways he'd forgotten were possible, sharing stories about his work, his dreams, his fears. Eleanor listened to all of it without judgment, asking thoughtful questions and offering gentle insights. She made Marcus feel like his experiences mattered, like his perspective was valuable. 3 weeks after Eleanor made her offer, the sale closed. Eleanor Whitman became the new owner of Wellington Arms on a Thursday morning in November. That afternoon, she and Marcus stood in the lobby together, looking around at their building. "So," Eleanor said, "what do we do first?" Marcus smiled. "First, we tell Mrs. Chen she can start planning her herb garden for the roof." Eleanor laughed. "I love that plan." That evening, they held a celebration in the courtyard. Mrs. Chen brought homemade cookies. Ruth made coffee for everyone. Tasha's baby laughed and played while the adults talked and planned improvements for their saved home. Marcus stood a little apart from the group, watching Eleanor move easily among the residents. She belonged here now, not as a wealthy outsider slumming with working people, but as a neighbor and friend. "You did good, honey," Ruth said, appearing beside Marcus with a cup of coffee. "We all did good," Marcus said. "I'm not talking about saving the building. I'm talking about letting that girl into your life." Marcus looked at Ruth with surprise. "Oh, don't look so shocked," Ruth said. "I've been watching you for years, keeping everyone at arm's length. But that girl got past your defenses, didn't she?" Marcus nodded. "Yeah, she did." "Good. You deserve to be happy, Marcus. You deserve to be loved by someone who sees how special you are." Across the courtyard, Eleanor caught Marcus's eye and smiled. She was talking to Mrs. Chen about garden plans, but her attention was partly on him, like she was aware of where he was, even while focused on someone else. That night, Marcus stood outside Eleanor's door, Unit 12B, the right door this time, and knocked. Eleanor opened it wearing jeans and a soft sweater, her hair down around her shoulders. "Hi," she said. "Hi, I wanted to ask you something." "What?" Marcus took a deep breath. "Would you like to have dinner with me tomorrow night? A real date, somewhere nice." Eleanor's smile lit up her entire face. "I would love that." "Good," Marcus said. "It's about time I took my business partner out properly." Eleanor stepped closer to him. "Is that what I am? Your business partner?" Marcus reached up and touched her face gently. "You're my business partner, and you're the woman I'm falling in love with." Eleanor's eyes filled with tears, but they were happy tears. "I love you too," she whispered. This time, when they kissed, Marcus didn't hold back. He let himself feel everything: the tenderness, the hope, the overwhelming gratitude for this unexpected gift of love. When they broke apart, Eleanor rested her hand on Marcus's chest, over his heart. "Do you want to come in?" she asked softly. Marcus hesitated for just a moment, feeling the weight of 10 years of caution. Then he looked at Eleanor's face and saw only love and acceptance there. "Yes," he said. "I want to come in." Eleanor stepped aside, and Marcus crossed the threshold. Not into the wrong apartment this time, but into the right place, with the right woman, at exactly the right moment. As Eleanor closed the door behind them, Marcus realized that sometimes the best things in life began with opening the wrong door. But they continued when you found the courage to walk through the right one. 6 months later, Marcus woke up in Eleanor's bed, their bed now, to the sound of laughter from the courtyard below. Saturday morning in the building meant community coffee time, a tradition that had grown from Eleanor's original afternoon reading sessions. "Do you hear that?" Eleanor said, snuggling closer to him. "Mrs. Chen teaching Tasha how to transplant seedlings? Ruth giving Frank dating advice." They both laughed. Frank had been shyly courting a woman from the coffee shop downstairs, and Ruth had appointed herself his romantic coach. "I should go help with the garden," Marcus said, but he made no move to get up. "In a minute," Eleanor said. "I want to tell you something first." Marcus turned to face her. "What?" Eleanor smiled. "My mother called yesterday." Marcus felt his usual tension when Eleanor's family was mentioned. Relations with the Whitmans were still strained, though slowly improving. "What did she want?" "She wants to invest in our building management approach. She thinks what we're doing here could work in other properties." Marcus was stunned. "Really?" "Really," she said, and I quote, "Your boyfriend seems to understand tenant relations better than most professionals in the business." "She called me your boyfriend?" Eleanor grinned. I may have corrected her on that point. Marcus raised an eyebrow. "What did you tell her?" Eleanor reached over to her nightstand and pulled out a small velvet box. Marcus's heart stopped. "I told her," Eleanor said, opening the box to reveal a simple, elegant ring, "that you're my fiancé." Marcus stared at the ring, then at Eleanor's nervous, hopeful face. "Eleanor Whitman," he said slowly, "are you proposing to me?" "Marcus Reed, I am absolutely proposing to you." Eleanor's voice was steady and sure. "I love you. I love our life together. I love the community we're building. I want all of it to be permanent." Marcus looked at the woman who had changed everything for him, who had seen past his defenses to the man he was underneath, who had chosen him not as a charity case or a rebellion against her family, but as an equal partner in creating something beautiful. "Yes," Marcus said, taking the ring from the box and sliding it onto his finger. "Yes, I'll marry you." Eleanor threw her arms around him, laughing and crying at the same time. "I love you," she said against his neck. "I love you too," Marcus replied, holding her close. From the courtyard below came the sound of applause. Marcus and Eleanor looked at each other and started laughing. "How long do you think they've been waiting for this?" Eleanor asked. "Probably since the day you knocked on my door," Marcus said. They got dressed and went downstairs to find the entire building community gathered in the courtyard, grinning expectantly. "Well," Ruth called out, "did she ask you properly?" Marcus held up his left hand, showing off the ring. The cheer that went up could probably be heard 3 blocks away. Mrs. Chen immediately started planning the wedding reception, insisting it should be held on the roof garden. Tasha offered to make the cake. Frank promised to handle all the building maintenance so Marcus could have a proper honeymoon. As the celebration continued around them, Marcus and Eleanor found themselves standing apart from the group, hands linked, watching their chosen family plan their future. "Are you sure about this?" Marcus asked quietly. "Marrying a guy who fixes boilers for a living?" Eleanor squeezed his hand. "I'm marrying a man who builds communities, who protects people, who made me believe in love again. Everything else is just details." Marcus leaned down and kissed her, tasting the future on her lips. It had taken him 10 years to learn how to trust again. 10 years to open the right door. But as he held Eleanor in the courtyard of the building they'd saved together, surrounded by the people they both loved, Marcus knew it had been worth the wait. Sometimes the best love stories began with a mistake, opening the wrong door at just the right moment. But they ended with a choice, walking through the right door with courage, hope, and an open heart. Marcus Reed had finally found his way home.